with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Practical Wisdom for Leaders. We have a returning guest today. The first time she was on, I had not yet read her book. And then I didn't read the book, I listened to the book. But she reads the book, and she's got a great voice, and she tells wonderful stories. So I would highly recommend the audiobook if you choose to learn that way. Cathy Carroll, Hug of War. And it's this book that really explores the dynamics of family business. And I think, in my mind, really any business. I think a lot of the concepts directly apply to the work of leadership. And she just does this beautiful job of situating us in that context. But so much of it, what we're going to talk about today, really nicely kind of translates to businesses of all types. But just a wonderful book. Cathy, I'm so thankful that you're back with me today. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be back, Scott.
I reached out to you, I think randomly one afternoon, and I just said, hey, I'm listening and I love it. And you wrote me back and said, thank you. And then I was listening to a specific chapter on polarities, and we touched on polarities just a little bit last time. So for listeners, pause now, go back, listen to our first episode. You'll see Cathy's full bio. She grew up in a family-owned business. She ran a family-owned business. She worked in corporate America, a number of experiences, and is now an author, and she does consulting work. But listen to that episode, push pause right now, and then you're going to pick up with part 2 here. And we talked a little bit last time about polarities. And so I got to that chapter in your book. And again, this podcast amazes me, this whole process, Cathy, of going through a Ph.D., going through then teaching for 18 years, studying, writing, discussing leader development, living, drinking it. And I'm constantly kind of stumbling upon these new topics that I just heard of Barry Johnson and his work, but I just never really explored it. And as I learn more and more, and especially listening to your chapter, this is just a critical topic. So that's where I want to go. And I know you have some stories, and I know you have some polarities or tensions, but maybe prop up the topic a little bit, and then we'll jump in. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more that this is such an emergent and important part of leadership, and it is going to continue to manifest more and more in the world. So I'm honored to share the elements of it's chapter 9 from Hug of War. It opens with 10 polarity principles. And what I thought I'd do, Scott, is tell some stories and then describe the principles that are exemplified by the story. And I've got 4 stories. Does that sound like a good plan?
Awesome. Yes.
Excellent.
I'm just going to sit back and listen.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'll pause between my stories. By the way, all these stories are true. These are real clients. To be honest, I didn't lean so much on the family business side of this just because this is bigger than family business, but I do have one family business story. But the first story is Peter. He's an entrepreneur. His business is about 15 years old, and this year he's going to cross the $1 billion revenue mark, which is just something he's thrilled and ecstatic about, and I couldn't be happier for him. And he is an idea monkey. He's constantly thinking of new ideas. And it's got his leadership team in a real whiplash because they go into meetings and he's this idea and this idea and this idea. And they're just trying to execute on all of the strategy that he keeps introducing over and over. So they're really having a hard time holding the tension of strategy and execution because he gets bored to death with anything that is execution related. He's just do it, do it, do it. But his gift for strategy has become a strength overused because it's derailing the team. So I introduced that story because this is sort of a foundational understanding of polarities. Let me pause and just explain what a polarity is. A polarity is a set of interdependent opposites that need each other to exist. Sort of like an inhale and an exhale. They define each other. An inhale doesn't exist without an exhale and vice versa. Well, in leadership, strategy and execution are a core polarity. You can't lead a business with only strategy because you could think about ideas all day long and not get anything done. And frankly, you can't lead a business with only execution because you have no idea where you're going. So these two things need each other to exist. And what's fascinating about polarities is once you start to see them, you can't not see them anymore. And they are indestructible. They can't be solved. You can't say, should I strategize or should I execute? You need to do both. And so the shorthand version of polarity thinking is both and thinking. And it undermines the deeply human tendency to think in terms of either or. We're so wired for either or. And it takes a little while for our brains to adjust to this new concept of both and. So principle number one, polarities cannot be solved. They must be managed. Principle number two, both poles in a polarity tension are necessary over time. Neither pole alone is sufficient to create and sustain high performance. And polarity principle number three, an over-focus on one pole while neglecting the other will guarantee the overuse of the preferred pole.
Okay, so that is awesome. Let me give you an example just to make sure, and maybe listeners, it could be helpful for them. CEO of Korn Ferry, and this was in the last couple of years, I think, suggested that the work of leaders is to perform and transform. So this is another potential example, and I thought it was beautifully phrased. These leaders, if I'm Microsoft right now or Google, we see Google struggling a little bit with this of how do we perform and really ensure that we maintain our level of success. And in the world of LLMs, which I really don't Google things anymore. I go to the LLM, I go to ChatGPT to find out what I need. I don't say, give me a 10-day itinerary for Switzerland and see what I sift through Google. I go get one from ChatGPT. And so they're navigating this tension of perform and transform. And if we focus on any one of those, then it seems to me that would align with your first three. Is that accurate?
It sounds like it, and I love how it rhymes.
Yes.
It does. Yeah, it does. Because performing is great and there's an opportunity to transform. And if you're only performing, you're missing the chance to transform. And if you transform and you don't perform, who knows where you're going to end up. It's sort of like that idea monkey challenge that you have. So I think it is a beautiful description of a polarity.
Yeah. If we were to go to New York, for instance, for a moment, you have like a Kodak, which really struggled with that tension. They were performing, but the business was based on paper. And so they couldn't transform into a new version of themselves. Or you have an IBM, which was trying really hard to transform, but I think they've never really, at least in recent times, as I'm aware, gotten back to that level of performance where they were.
It's that tradition innovation tension.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know who did it really well, in my opinion, is Netflix. Netflix had the CD in the mail. Remember back in the day? You used to get a CD in the mail.
Yeah.
Or a DVD, maybe not a DVD in the mail. And it was a big deal when they said they were going to move on to streaming. And this is the end of Netflix. It'll never come back. And now look at Netflix, right? Credit to them. They were able to honor the tradition and innovate given the new technologies that exist.
Well, and along that story, there's a fascinating documentary on Netflix about the last Blockbuster, and Blockbuster twice had an opportunity to buy Netflix.
Fascinating. I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah. And right. And Blockbuster did not innovate. Yeah. They missed out. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So story two.
So this is a colleague of mine, Janine. She was really good at saying yes. She was like, yeah, okay, sure. And she lost control of her life because she said yes to everybody else and she stopped saying yes to herself. She wanted to be known as nice. In all honesty, she had an identity as a pageant contestant when she was younger. And she kind of knew the brand of pageant contestants could be a little snarky. And so she didn't want to be known as beautiful and mean. She wanted to be known as nice. So she developed this identity around being really nice. But it got really problematic. After she got married, her husband was frustrated that she was always prioritizing other people. They had a child. It got too much. And she said, that is it. I am drawing boundaries. And so she got really good at saying no. And she drew very good boundaries. She prioritized her life, but it happened at the expense of connection to others. She was so good at saying no that she really lost connection to her friends. She lost connection to her colleagues, and it really was undermining the quality of her life. So as we worked together, she recognized that she was managing this tension between saying yes and saying no. And she said, I'm going to find the middle ground. And I said, okay, that's great if you find the middle ground, but it's sort of like sitting in the middle of a seesaw and not inhaling or exhaling, but just sort of holding your breath. I'm not sure that's really what you want. She was like, oh my gosh. So our work was actually building an identity around both saying yes and saying no, having the gracious, agreeable, desirable way to be in accommodating relationship with people and drawing boundaries when it was appropriate. It was a really good engagement. And she expanded her identity from one to another and then to include both. So here are the two principles. When we experience the overuse of one pole, we tend to see the benefits of the other pole as the solution. So we swing to that other pole and expose ourselves to its overuses.
Yes.
And then the next one is we all have pole preferences, and they're typically born from an aversion to the overuse of the opposite pole.
Well, and you tell a story in the book about you and your father. Would you just touch on that really quickly? I mean, is that an appropriate example right now to kind of draw upon in yourself?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. My fourth story is more about me, but I'll touch on this. Yeah, I honestly built my identity around being not him. My father was very disruptive as a child. He loved to spend money, and he was command and control dominant father in our family. And I didn't like being the kid of that because in my experience, he was in the overuse of all of those now that I see his strengths. When I was a kid, when I saw disruption, I saw chaos. When I saw spending, I saw like inefficient and inappropriate use of funds. When I saw the dominant leadership, I felt stifled. So I built my identity as a saver, as a servant leader, and as a stabilizer. So my value in the world was defined by, I'm going to do these things because that is wrong, that is bad. And it took me a long time to realize that there's actually great value in disruption. And goodness, you cannot save your way to profitability, right? I ran the risk of running a very complacent, stable organization that didn't innovate, didn't do anything exciting, right? And servant leadership has its strengths, but man, I think very often about these two rope companies that were competitors. We owned both of them. They were very, very different. And they would each ask me to do the opposite. And as a servant leader, I wanted to enable both of those because they were both good. They were just different. And I had to work on finding my true north as a leader. And it was hard to do. So servant leadership, in my opinion, has its great strengths and some limitations. It's not the end all and be all.
Oh, 100%, 100%. But I think to your point, we can over-orient because, of course, there are situations where being a servant leader isn't the appropriate intervention, isn't the appropriate mindset, and it's just not. But I think if we blindly, back to kind of the struggles we as humans have of this kind of dualistic framing at times of, well, I'm always a servant leader. That's always the best. Is it though?
The command and control. If you got hit by a bus, I'm not going to gather a group and say, all right, what do we think we should do? Let's ideate about. No, I'm going to say, you CPR, you 911. Like command and control is appropriate in an emergency, right? Yeah. It's not very trendy right now, but it is actually an important leadership skill, in my opinion.
100%. Yep.
Story 3, Isaac and Heath. These are first cousins. that built out their grandfather's CPG business. It's a well-known family brand. They're at about $500 million in annual revenue. And they were both approaching their mid-60s. They traditionally had reinvested profits. They took modest W-2 salaries and reinvested all their profits, which is why they had such an incredibly successful business. And they had recently renegotiated their shareholder agreement. For the shareholder agreement, they agreed on a relatively low valuation of the business for insurance purposes in case one died and the other had to buy the other one out. And they also engaged a third-party evaluator to value the business, and it came out to be a very high. So there was a big gap between this low valuation and this high valuation. So one of the cousins, Isaac, really wanted to plow profits back into the business because he had a child who wanted to take over leadership of the family business. So he wanted to continue into the fourth generation. His cousin, Heath, however, wanted to sell to a strategic because he was done. He had worked his career. He had children, but they weren't interested in the business. And he was like, you know what? It's time. And so Heath's motivation, it's time for me to give back to the community. I really want to take the return on my equity and my investment and my blood, sweat, and tears. And I want to give it to community. I want to retire in comfort. And his cousin Isaac was like, we need to continue growing this business. I've got a child who wants to take over and I want to leverage their talent and I want to continue our family legacy. They both were really fond of the family legacy. In fact, Heath, interestingly, was the one who had the family name in his last name and Isaac didn't. They were both conflict avoidant. So that's the setup. And they were in a circular fight over and over and over about whether they sell or whether they keep, whether they sell and whether they keep. And what they ended up doing is arguing the diagonals. And here's what I mean. I'm going to have to draw a visual description.
Sure.
Imagine you've got a big plus sign. And on one end of the plus sign, you have the pole of the polarity invest. On the other side, you've got the pole harvest. So you got invest and harvest on either end of the pole. And then above invest, you've got some benefits. And they might be growing fast, continuing the legacy. And then underneath invest, on the lower left corner, you've got the overuses of invest. So you can't help the community. You're rich on paper, but after decades of W-2, you can't really retire on anything substantial. On the other side, on the right side, above harvest, you've got all the benefits of harvest, like we can give back to the community, I can retire in comfort. And then the lower right, you've got the overuses of harvest, which you lose connection to the family legacy if we sell the business. And we have no connection to the rising generation. So what happened is Isaac argued the upsides, the upper left corner of invest, and the lower left corner, overuses of harvest. So he was arguing this diagonal. His cousin Heath was arguing the upsides of harvest and the overuses of invest, the other diagonal. And they just argued the diagonals over and over and over because they were both right.
Yes.
Both diagonals were true. And that's what's so vexing about these polarities is that everyone is right. If you think about Congress, this is what we do in Congress. We argue the diagonals about the benefits of liberal and the overuses of conservative, and then the other ones argue the benefits of conservative and the overuses of liberal. Okay, this introduces two more polarity principles. First one, arguing the diagonals puts force against force because both poles are right. Each diagonal point of view is correct, but on its own, incomplete.
Wow.
And then the second one is to leverage the ongoing tension of any polarity, supplement either or thinking with both. And I'll say how they did that in a moment.
So this is where, and I love hearing you kind of describe arguing the diagonals again, because it's a beautiful visual of some common scenarios we get in interpersonal relationships, in any organizational life, faith-based organizations. And so I love the description. Talk about how they unraveled from this, how we help them move off of the diagonals and to a place where we can find some common ground.
So they were stuck in this, should we continue to invest in the business or should we sell? And again, it was an either or question. And once they framed it as a polarity, they started to ask themselves different questions. They had identified the benefits of both poles. And so they said, all right, well, how can we continue our grandfather's legacy? And how can we give back to the community? And how can we leverage the talent in the rising generation? And how can we retire in comfort? And what they came to realize is there's an opportunity for Isaac to buy Heath out.
Mm.
The tension that then became the real issue was they had this difference in valuation, right? Isaac was very happy to buy out his cousin at the very low valuation in the shareholder agreement. His cousin Heath was very happy to sell at the high valuation, which was what the marketplace, right? So they had to spend quite a bit of time negotiating a reasonable amount that made both cousins feel respected. And they did. And they had a very successful transition. One cousin bought out the other, and everyone got what they wanted.
Yes.
It was a very successful outcome.
Yeah, but just like in improv, where we have yes and, it keeps possibilities open. It keeps us in a place of thinking and solutions. And that dualistic or binary thinking, either or thinking, it shuts down. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And it's so hard to change our brains. I've gotten to the point now where anytime I hear the word or, I just pause and say, wait, is this truly an either or? Because there are either ors. Like problems are often an either or question. Polarities, no. And so whenever I hear or, I'm constantly thinking, hey, is there a both and here that we haven't even considered? And it's shocking to me how often there is.
Wow. Okay, story 4.
All right, here we go, rounding it out. This is actually my story. So I am the vice chair of a board of a nonprofit that I'm crazy about. And I've been admiring the chair for several months here. She takes very clear, strong, decisive action. She listens to people before she makes a decision, but then she makes the right call, in her opinion. And I often agree. She is universally respected by the board. She's not liked by everybody on the board, but she is universally respected. And I will be stepping into that chair role in January.
Ah.
So I am exquisitely sensitive to her leadership style because her ability to be decisive when you've got a lot of competing opinions and perspectives has been my growth edge. And it's been my growth edge for a long time because I've built my identity around being not my dad. My dad's very disagreeable, not friendly. So I have built this identity about being agreeable and kind and accommodating. So I really struggle to find that true north when I've got a lot of people who have different opinions because my inclination is to want to please these other people. In the whole fight, flight, freeze, fawn, I am a total fawner, and I've known it for a long time. Like, this is not new information to me. And I'm so exquisitely sensitive to this issue because I know I will be pushed into this zone of growth very, very soon. In fact, my husband, he knows this much about me. We joke. I don't know if you've ever watched that Key and Peele skit where they've got Obama and then they've got Luther, his anger translator. Oh, it's hilarious. If you haven't seen it, anyone who's listening, go find Key and Peele and look for Luther, the anger translator. It is absolutely hilarious. My husband is my anger translator because he'll stand up for me in a way that I won't. So, unlike Janine, I did not swing when I realized that I was in the overuse of this, agreeableness. I did not swing to the other direction. No, I clung to my desire to be agreeable because I'm terrified of being like my father. Like, my aversion to the overuse of his gift for disruption and disagreeableness is such a strong aversion that I really double click and hang on to the agreeable side. And so my leadership is going to have to get comfortable with the discomfort of letting people down, of disappointing other people. And that's going to be a really acute, painful point. And so this is the final 3 polarity principles I want to introduce. Strong pole preferences are frequently connected to a strength or identity. Harmonizing poles or both and thinking may necessitate facing your fears. I'm going to have to face some really uncomfortable fears when I step into this role. And I'm ready for the task and prepared for it. It's going to push me buttons.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And then the last one is the greater the desire for the benefits of one pole, the greater the tolerance for its overuses, because these overusers are considered less bad than the overuses of the other pole. So I am more willing to tolerate the overuses of being accommodating and agreeable because I think the overuses of being disagreeable are worse.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you're moving into this with, it's so admirable. It's inspiring. I mean, you're moving into this role, you're entering it knowing there's intentionality, there's going to be an opportunity for practice, and you're seeing this. And I have great respect for that. Now, speaking of the word respect, you mentioned liked and respected. Can we be both?
Absolutely.
Yes. So I
Absolutely.
think I think you're going to be navigating that space of being liked and respected. And how do we, in some cases, thread that needle? And of course, there's going to be individuals at times where we're not in harmony, and there's going to be a different, back to your seesaw metaphor. But in a general sense, I think you can come out of that being liked and respected.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I always hated that interview question. I think I didn't get a job once because I said both. The person said, no, it should always be liked, or it should always be
Be
respected.
respected. How
Yeah.
interesting.
And, that was kind of their frame. But I said, I think you probably can be both. But I love the fact that you're walking into this experience with a mindset of, okay, I'm going to practice and I'm going to push on this growth edge and pay very close attention to kind of my own pull at times and pushing back on that when it's appropriate and just being intentional about how we're intervening.
Well, as an Enneagram 9, disharmony is not a comfortable place for me. And I've gotten really good at engaging in constructive conflict. Like, I have built my skills and I see the value of engaging in conflict. So I'm no longer anxious about conflict. I'm kind of actually excited about it now. I think we get the better ideas when we engage in constructive conflict. So I'm excited about that. The other thing that I'm doing intentionally is, as I step into the role, I'm going to tell this board, who I've now worked with now for quite a while, look, this is going to be a growing edge for me and it's going to make me uncomfortable, but I'd like you to hold me accountable. Mm-hmm. So when you see me tempted to capitulate to someone else's idea because I want to please them, bring it to my attention, because this is a growth edge for me and I'm going to really be trying and consciously to lead with a stronger true north that is about the needs of the organization and not about placating the emotional needs of people around me.
Wow. Bam. That's the only thing I can say. Well, okay. Power-packed episode, like just locked in. I love it. As we begin to wind down our time together today, what's caught your attention recently? What have you been reading? What have you been listening to? It could have something to do with what we just discussed. It could have nothing to do with it. But what might listeners be interested in?
This has absolutely nothing to do with what we've discussed. I have been reading an utterly delightful book. The title is Plant Intelligence in the Imaginal Realm. The author is Stephen Herod Booner. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but it is such a witty, clever book. It is a delightful read, and it's about how we humans think we are the most intelligent species on the planet. And we have this sort of apex ideal that, we have opposable thumbs, therefore we must be so much more. We have the ability to reason. We can be so much smarter. But he goes into such exquisitely beautiful detail about the organisms and plants that have so much innate intelligence that we as humans don't even recognize or appreciate or see. And I'm only partially through the book, and I am loving every minute of it.
Oh, is it fiction or nonfiction?
It would be, I think, technically nonfiction.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a story at all. And it's just so much fun to read. It's witty. Like the way he describes things, I giggle throughout the entire book. It's just so fun.
You look at like a tardigrade, or sometimes they're called a water bear, where you can like freeze these things. You can shoot them into space. You can shoot them out of guns and they live. The superpowers of this little organism called the tardigrade, I imagine you will stumble upon the tardigrade in this book because it just has these superpowers. You can dry it out and then 10 years later, put water on it and it will come alive again. So I love what you're saying, because whether it's, the blue whale lives 400 years or just some of the superpowers of some of these organisms, I mean, it's just not to be believed. And yes, so cool. It's
humbling. It's humbling and a reminder of how as humans, we really need to stay humble.
I love your hack. Every time I hear "or" now, it's a ping, for me to, because yes, we have to stay humble because we are limited. We are limited. We are limited. Cathy, so excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for helping us better understand this place of polarities. I think the 4 stories you shared were just incredible. They were awesome. They really help us make sense. Listeners, buy this book, download the audiobook, and tap into Cathy's wisdom because it's there and it's awesome. And you know what? I look forward to our next conversation. More and more and more, I am coming to realize that polarities, navigating these tensions, and there's likely hundreds, if not thousands of them. That's what amazes me. I don't think we've mapped these things yet. Some of them, not all of them. But these are happening at the individual level, interpersonal level, team level, organizational level. It's just fascinating to me. But managing these polarities more and more is a topic that I think is of critical importance when it comes to leadership. And training people to be aware of the fact that this is what they are navigating, these tensions. And so the work of Cathy, I am so appreciative for her wisdom and really helping me better understand this topic. I hope all of you are interested in this topic as well. I think it's ripe. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. As always, thank you so much for checking in. If you have not done so yet, start kind of orienting your eye towards the ILA conference in Prague. March over to that website, start poking around, and start some of that planning process. It's going to be incredible, and hope to see you there. Take care, everyone. Be well. Bye-bye. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.